In a time when alliances and conflicts abounded in the fertile and turbulent lands of ancient Orient, Jezebel was born, daughter of King Ethbaal of Sidon, a great Phoenician city renowned for its maritime trade and fervent worship of ancient pagan gods. Raised amidst the greed for power, Jezebel was educated not only to be a mere princess, but a fervent defender of the beliefs and traditions of her people. She was a woman of strong spirit, whose faith in the Phoenician gods, especially Baal, the god of rain and fertility, defined her essence. Jezebel's destiny took a crucial turn when her marriage to Ahab, the king of Israel, was arranged. This marriage was not just a matrimonial alliance, but a strategic agreement devised to unite two powerful nations and ensure peace between their peoples. For Jezebel, however, this union held a much deeper significance. It represented a divine opportunity to expand the influence of Baal, introducing his worship into the lands of Israel, where monotheistic worship of Yahweh predominated. Upon arriving in Israel, Jezebel soon established herself as a figure of authority and influence. Her presence in the palace did not go unnoticed, and her determination to promote the worship of Baal challenged established traditions. With Achab by her side, she began to erect altars to Baal and organize ceremonies that left a spiritual mark on the landscape of Israel, introducing the Phoenician gods. Jezebel's influence over Achab was notable. The king, though initially hesitant, was ultimately persuaded by his wife's conviction. Under her influence, Achab consented to the construction of an imposing temple dedicated to Baal in Samaria, the capital of Israel, and the worship of the Phoenician god thrived with royal support. Jezebel also brought with her priests of Baal and Astarte, who gained great power and influence in the Israelite court. However, Jezebel's determination to promote her gods faced strong opposition from the prophets of Yahweh, who saw her as a threat to the purity of their faith. The tension between the two cults escalated, resulting in confrontations that would leave a mark on the history of Israel. The marriage between Jezebel and Achab represented not only a symbol of political alliance, but also a catalyst for one of the most tumultuous periods in Israel's spiritual history. Through Jezebel, the nation was confronted with challenges that tested its faith and determination. In addition to being Achab's foreign wife, Jezebel was a fervent worshiper of Baal, the Phoenician god of rain and fertility, and her presence brought a wave of spiritual change that shook Israel to its core. With unwavering steadfastness and a faith that defied tradition, she embarked on the mission to transform the spirituality of an entire nation. Her arrival heralded a new chapter in Israel's history. The air was infused with the scent of exotic incense and the murmur of unfamiliar ceremonies. Although Achab initially resisted his wife's influence, he soon found himself ensnared in the web of her conviction. Jezebel, with a combination of subtle persuasion and unyielding determination, gradually molded the king's will until his voice echoed hers, promoting devotion to Baal with a passion that impressed all. With Jezebel's influence, Achab erected an imposing temple for Baal in Samaria, the epicenter of the kingdom of Israel. This action was not merely a manifestation of faith, but a bold provocation to the traditional veneration of Yahweh, which had been the foundation of Israelite identity. The temple was not just a physical structure, but a symbol of Jezebel's control over the king, and consequently, over the entire kingdom. The queen did not stop there. She brought priests and prophets of Baal, ensuring the dissemination of the Phoenician god's cult. These priests assumed prominent roles, conducting ceremonies and sacrifices that evidenced the intensity of their devotion. Thanks to Jezebel, Baal became a dominant force in Israel, challenging the prophets of Yahweh and representing a threat to the historical trajectory of the people. Jezebel's promotion of Baal worship was not without consequences. It ignited a spark of resistance among Yahweh's faithful, who saw in her the embodiment of apostasy and corruption. Prophets like Elijah rose in opposition, marking the beginning of a spiritual conflict that would define an era. This confrontation was not just between two gods, but between two worldviews, two faiths intertwined in the struggle for the heart of Israel. Jezebel's story is a narrative of passion, power, and unwavering faith. Her influence over Macabre and her promotion of Baal worship irreversibly altered the course of Israelite history, leaving an indelible mark on the memory of a nation. The Phoenician queen, with her strength of will and fervent devotion, became an emblematic figure, an eternal reminder of the transformative power of faith and influence. As the worship of Baal took root in Israel under Jezebel's indomitable influence, a dark shadow began to spread over Yahweh's followers. The queen, with her unwavering determination and unyielding devotion to Baal, saw no place in her kingdom for those who opposed her religious vision. Thus, she initiated a relentless persecution against the prophets of Yahweh, determined to eradicate any vestige of resistance to her spiritual regime. With royal power by her side, Jezebel launched a campaign of terror against the prophets of Yahweh, using both force and cunning to hunt them down. Many were forced to hide in caves and desolate places, fleeing from the queen's wrath that seemed to know no bounds in her quest for religious supremacy. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the hills of Israel like a harbinger of death for those who remained loyal to the God of their ancestors. Amidst this darkness, the figure of Elijah emerged as a beacon of hope. The prophet of Yahweh, known for his courage and unwavering faith, openly challenged Jezebel's authority, condemning the worship of Baal and predicting divine punishment for the kingdom due to its transgressions. The rivalry between Elijah and Jezebel quickly became the epicenter of the spiritual conflict dividing Israel, a struggle not only for earthly power, but for the soul of a nation. The showdown culminated on Mount Carmel, where Elijah proposed a challenge to the prophets of Baal, a test to determine once and for all which God was true, Yahweh or Baal. In front of a gathered crowd, the prophets of Baal cried out for hours to their God to send fire from heaven and consume their sacrifice, but there was no response. Then Elijah built an altar to Yahweh, and even after pouring water over the sacrifice to demonstrate the magnitude of the challenge, fire from heaven descended at Elijah's request, consuming the sacrifice and proving Yahweh's supremacy. The defeat of the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel marked a turning point. Jezebel, however, intensified her fury against Elijah and the followers of Yahweh, promising vengeance against the prophet who had challenged her authority and embarrassed her gods. The tension between the queen and the prophet of Yahweh symbolized the ongoing struggle between the forces of faith and power, a battle that would continue to define the destiny of Israel. In the years that followed, Jezebel's persecution of the prophets of Yahweh, though brutal and relentless, failed to extinguish the flame of monotheistic faith burning in the hearts of the people of Israel. On the contrary, her actions only strengthened the determination of the faithful, who continued to resist and keep alive their belief in their God, challenging oppression with the strength of their faith and the courage of their hearts. The story of Jezebel and her persecution of the followers of Yahweh is a powerful testimony to the eternal struggle between light and darkness, faith and despair, a struggle that continues to resonate through the centuries. After the bold challenge proposed by Elijah on Mount Carmel, the atmosphere in Israel was electrified with tension and expectation. The prophet of Yahweh, alone against 450 prophets of Baal, was about to demonstrate not only the impotence of idol gods in the face of the God of Israel, but also vindicate the faith of a people swayed by Jezebel's zeal. That day, under the blue sky stretching over Mount Carmel, an astonished silence embraced the crowd gathered to witness the confrontation. The prophets of Baal cried out, danced, and mutilated themselves in fervent pleas for a manifestation of their God. But there was no response, only the empty echo of their prayers against the dry stones. Then it was Elijah's turn. With a calmness that defied the tension of the moment, he rebuilt the altar of Yahweh, using 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. in a gesture of unwavering faith. He ordered water to be poured over the altar once, twice, 3 times, until the trench around it overflowed, making the miracle that would follow undeniable. Elijah prayed. No dances or shouts, just simple words, yet laden with faith and power. And then the fire from heaven descended, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the water, leaving only ashes and the scent of renewed faith. The crowd, witnessing Yahweh's undeniable power, fell prostrate in worship, proclaiming, "Yahweh is God, Yahweh is God." This moment of triumph, however, did not mark the end of the conflict between Elijah and Jezebel. The queen, upon receiving news of her prophet's humiliating defeat, was inflamed with anger and vowed Elijah's death, sending the prophet on a journey of flight and introspection. Alone, fearing for his life, Elijah fled to the desert, where, under the shade of a broom tree, he wished for death. But Yahweh was not finished with Elijah. In a moment of vulnerability, the prophet found not only divine sustenance, but also a manifestation of God, not in the storm, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in the stillness of a gentle breeze. In that intimate encounter, Elijah received the renewal of his mission and the mandate to anoint kings and prophets who would continue the struggle against the idolatry promoted by Jezebel. The story of Elijah and his confrontation with the prophets of Baal remains a powerful testimony to faith that defies empires, and to a God who intervenes in history, not only with displays of power, but also in the quietness of a calm and gentle voice. This episode, recorded in the pages of biblical history, resonates through the centuries, reminding all of Yahweh's constant presence and unshakable sovereignty, even in the face of the most formidable adversities. In the sequence of events that shook the foundations of Israel, a new trial was approaching, one that would test the faith and resilience of the people in a way never seen before. Before the dramatic showdown on Mount Carmel, Elijah, moved by Yahweh's word, had pronounced a prophecy announcing a devastating drought over the land of Israel. This would not be a mere climatic anomaly, but a sign, a direct punishment for the idolatrous practices that had taken root under the influence of Jezebel and Macabre. The land, once fertile and abundant under Yahweh's blessings, began to wither. Rivers and streams dried up, crops failed, and a once green land transformed into a barren desert. The sky, which Macabre and Jezebel tried to appease with sacrifices to Baal, remained eerily clear, with no sign of the rains that Baal supposedly controlled. This calamity served as a mirror of the people's spiritual choices. Worship of false gods had led to spiritual and physical barrenness. The drought not only devastated the land, but also the heart of the people of Israel, bringing hunger, suffering, and despair. Yet even in this moment of distress, divine purpose was at work, weaving a profound lesson into the fabric of the nation. Yahweh, through adversity, was calling his people back to him, showing that no foreign god could provide or protect like him. Jezebel, faced with this calamity, remained unyielding in her devotion to Baal, refusing to acknowledge Yahweh's sovereignty. Jezebel's reaction to the drought was not one of contrition or seeking Yahweh, but an intensification of her persecution of the prophets of the God of Israel, whom she blamed for the calamity that had befallen the land. In her conception, the solution to the crisis did not lie in reconciliation with Yahweh, but in the complete eradication of his influence. On the other hand, Elijah remained as a beacon of faith, awaiting the moment when he would once again receive Yahweh's word to act. That moment came after 3 long years, when Yahweh sent him back to Macabre with a message. The drought would end, but only after Israel turned back to Yahweh, forsaking Baal and the false prophets whom Jezebel had introduced into the heart of the nation. The episode of the drought, announced by Elijah, and the subsequent showdown on Mount Carmel represent a crucial point in Israel's history. These events not only demonstrated the power and faithfulness of Yahweh, but also exposed the futility and danger of idolatry. Through drought and hunger, adversity and challenge, the people of Israel were reminded that only Yahweh is worthy of worship, a God who, even in the midst of judgment, offers paths of return and renewal for those who stray. In the unfolding of events that marked Israel's history, Jezebel's ambition was revealed in a dark and telling episode. After the breaking of the drought and the return of Elijah, King Achab set his eyes on the vineyard of Naboth, a man of Jezreel, whose lands were adjacent to the royal palace. Achab, desiring to transform the vineyard into a vegetable garden, offered Naboth a fair price or a better vineyard in exchange. However, Naboth, attached to the inheritance of his ancestors and obeying the law prohibiting the sale of family properties permanently, definitively rejected the king's offer. Frustrated and melancholic over Naboth's refusal, Achab returned to his palace where Jezebel, observing her husband's sadness, decided to take matters into her own hands. With cold and calculated determination, she devised a nefarious plan that not only demonstrated her boundless ambition, but also her willingness to wield royal power relentlessly and unjustly. Jezebel wrote letters in Achab's name, sealed them with the royal seal, and sent them to the elders and nobles of Jezreel, instructing them to proclaim a fast and place Naboth in prominence among the people. Under the false accusation of blasphemy against God and the king, presented by two men of dubious character whom Jezebel had bribed, Naboth was condemned to death by stoning. With Naboth out of the way, the vineyard that Achab so desired fell into the king's hands, a macabre gift orchestrated by the relentless queen. The injustice committed against Naboth did not go unnoticed by the eyes of Yahweh. Elijah, the prophet whose life had been marked by confrontations with the idolatrous queen, was once again called to action by God. Finding Achab in Naboth's vineyard, now stained by spilled innocence, Elijah pronounced a divine condemnation against him and Jezebel. The sentence was dire. Just as Naboth had been violently uprooted from his land, Achab and his descendants would face a similar fate, and Jezebel would meet a particularly brutal end, with her body being devoured by dogs. The murder of Naboth and the subsequent prophetic condemnation revealed the depth of moral and spiritual corruption that had taken root in the heart of the kingdom under Achab's reign and Jezebel's influence. Jezebel's unchecked ambition, willing to violate the most sacred principles of justice and humanity to satisfy earthly desires, serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of greed and abuse of power. In this dark chapter of Israel's history, Naboth's memory remains a testimony to integrity and unwavering faith in the face of oppression, while the fate of Achab and Jezebel serves as a solemn warning that divine justice, though it may delay, never fails to reach those who act with wickedness and contempt for the laws of God and humanity. Following the humiliating defeat of the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel and the sinister murder of Naboth, the reign of Achab and Jezebel over Israel entered a period of inexorable decline. The demonstration of Yahweh's power and the subsequent prophetic condemnation against the royal couple not only shook the foundations of their government, but also marked the beginning of a growing resistance against their authority and idolatrous practices. Elijah's victory on Mount Carmel, followed by the rain that ended the long drought, revitalized the people's faith in Yahweh. This spiritual revival, however, placed Achab and Jezebel in an increasingly precarious position. The divine manifestation directly challenged the authority of Baal, the god of rain and fertility, whom Jezebel had attempted to promote as the primary deity of Israel. The people, witnessing Yahweh's miraculous acts, began to question not only the validity of Baal worship, but also the legitimacy of Achab's reign, which had allowed and even encouraged such practices. The murder of Naboth, an act of blatant injustice orchestrated by Jezebel, only exacerbated the situation. The revelation of this crime and the divine condemnation that followed exposed the moral corruption and depravity of the royal couple to everyone's eyes. The population, already uneasy under the weight of drought and famine, saw in this act a confirmation of their wickedness and a sign that their government was irreversibly marked by divine misfortune and curse. The prophetic condemnation of Elijah against Macabre and Jezebel was not just a prediction of their downfall, but also a declaration that divine justice would prevail. Macabre, confronted with the inevitability of his fate, showed signs of repentance, humbling himself before Yahweh. This change of heart, though momentary, delayed the execution of the divine sentence upon his house, but it could not divert the course of the already unfolding history. Jezebel's influence over Israel continued to crumble as opposition to her idolatrous agenda grew. Her once undisputed power now faced challenges not only from the prophets of Yahweh, but also from within the Israeli power structure itself. The political alliances forged under the promise of prosperity and stability began to unravel as the true extent of the spiritual and moral crisis inflicted by their reign on the kingdom became increasingly evident. The decline of Macabre and Jezebel's power was not solely the result of their individual actions, but also a testament to the eternal conflict between good and evil, justice and injustice, true devotion and idolatry. The history of their reign, marked by moments of tyranny and divine challenge, serves as a solemn reminder of the consequences of arrogance and impiety, and of the promise that in the end Yahweh's justice will prevail, restoring order and faith among his people. As the power of Macabre and Jezebel declined, the final fate of the Phoenician queen began to take shape with somber and inevitable contours. The prophecy of Elijah, delivered with the divine authority of Yahweh, left no doubt about the end awaiting Jezebel for her iniquities and the innocent bloodshed that had stained her hands. Elijah, the prophet who had become the herald of Yahweh's justice, confronted Macabre in the episode of Naboth's vineyard, declaring not only the imminent judgment upon the king, but also upon Jezebel. The prophecy was terrible in its precision. Jezebel would meet her end within the walls of Jezreel, and her body would be left to be devoured by dogs, with no one to bury her. This prophecy was not just a punishment for Naboth's death, but also for the entirety of her actions that had led Israel astray from Yahweh, promoting worship of foreign gods and spreading corruption and allure throughout the kingdom. The news of the prophecy spread like a cold wind among the courtiers and the people, bringing a mixture of fear and expectation. The fall of Jezebel, once unthinkable, now seemed an inevitable conclusion. Her influence, which had been so formidable, began to fade in the face of the promise of divine justice. Even among those who had bowed to her demands, a new consciousness began to emerge, a recognition of Yahweh's supreme power and the futility of resisting his will. Jehu's ascent to power was not a mere political accident, but an orchestrated piece in the intricate tapestry of divine destiny. Anointed by one of the disciples of the prophets, beloved of Elijah, Jehu was not just a warrior or a commander. He was the instrument of Yahweh's justice, designated to eradicate idolatry from Israel and purify the land of the idolatry that Jezebel had so diligently promoted. The execution of the divine sentence began with a swift revolt. Jehu, mounted on his chariot, advanced towards Jezreel with fierce determination. The news of his approach reached the ears of Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, who were in Israel. Both set out to confront Jehu, but only found their fate at the tips of his arrows, thus fulfilling the first part of Elijah's prophecy regarding the extinction of Macabre's descendants. Then came the moment of the final confrontation with Jezebel. The queen, even in the face of imminent downfall, maintained her composure and challenged Jehu from the palace window. Her makeup and adornments, far from being a sign of vanity, were the armor of a queen facing her end with the dignity of her royal stature. However, Jehu's response was swift and merciless. He ordered the eunuchs beside Jezebel to throw her down from the window. Her body was then trampled by the horses, and her flesh devoured by the dogs, thus fulfilling Elijah's prophecy and bringing a brutal end to the life of the woman who had defied God and his justice. With Jezebel's fall, the era of idolatry she had incited came to a bloody end. The reign of Macabre and Jezebel, marked by corruption and apostasy, became a solemn warning for future generations, a reminder of the terrible consequences of rebellion against Yahweh and the worship of idols. But even amidst the darkness and judgment, there was a promise of hope. Jezebel's tragic end was not just an act of justice, but also a sign of Yahweh's unwavering faithfulness to his people. Jezebel's fall marked the beginning of a new era for Israel, an era of spiritual renewal and restoration under the governance of leaders committed to true worship and divine justice. Thus, while Jezebel's story remains a solemn warning of the dangers of idolatry and human arrogance, it also serves as a powerful reminder of Yahweh's faithfulness and mercy, who even in the midst of judgment offers paths of return and renewal for those who stray. My brothers, we have come to the end of another journey through biblical stories. If this video was enlightening or touched you in any way, I ask you to leave a like on the video here and subscribe to our channel so that I can notify you as soon as a new video is released. God bless you.